So
Because
they just posted a bunch of changes, I think, or something.
Ah.
Or is this just a post of the feedback thread?
Upcoming mage updates. Double less talent removed.
Let's fucking go,
Really?
dude. I don't have to
man.
bitch about it. Let's go.
Really?
Yes.
Right, lads.
Yeah,
we need to pivot. Okay, we've got like we have a doc with everything that we're going to go through, and Blizzard are just like nah. Okay, right.
Here,
Do you want to?
I'm dropping it in our chat here.
Right. Do you want to do like a live? Do you want me to put this up on stream, and do you want to go through it like first reactions or anything, or what do you want to do?
I just took a quick.
I mean, we probably. What's that?
I just took a quick glance at it. There's no meaningful stuff other than temporal warp is gone.
Yeah, I would say let's introduce that at least first, so that we have kind of a basis for the rest. But
okay,
Radiant Spark will be redesigned to be much simpler.
Right. Do we want to start now? And do we want to do intros first, and then look at this?
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Right. Apparently, we're not doing audio checks or video checks or anything like that. We're just jumping right in. Okay. I'm ToeGrinder. If you don't know me, I'm the developer and guide writer behind MageHub.com. Also a contributor in the MageHub or the Mage Discord, and I've been writing Mage guides for a while now. With me are DGenRs and Porum. You might know them both, but do you want to give a quick introduction to yourselves? DGen, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm DGen. I'm a raider and bound on Soul Jin. I'm also a staff member and theory crafter in the Ultra Time Discord. I mostly dabble in fire stuff, and I also contribute to Toe's MageHub guide.
My name is Porum. I am also a raider in a different guild though, Divergence, and I write the Wowhead guide for Arcane. I do a lot of the theory crafting for Arcane. And I'm also a staff member in Ultra Time Discord and kind of helping out whichever mages are wayward and need help.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I didn't even mention I am also a raider and GM in Mist on Taran Mill EU. You think like doing the intro thing was so simple whenever you do so many like streams and guides, but like whenever I'm doing a video, I have to like put the intro like in the thing because I'm like, what did I do again? Okay. We were going to do sort of like an episode per spec, and we're starting with fire, and like that's still the plan. However, literally as I clicked the start stream button, Blizzard posted some fairly big mage changes. So we're going to go through those now. We have prepared nothing on these. This is like someone just said it as I was starting stream. So we're going to read through these, and I guess this is going to be like a first impressions thing before we get into, I guess, the meat of this. So I'll just read it out for the stream. So we have some updates coming in alpha in the next few weeks. These changes are almost exclusively specialization tree changes, but the goals are similar across all of them. So their goals are to allow you to acquire each specialization's core gameplay with the least talent point investment, simplify the rotation, and provide tools to help you adapt your damage profile to match with a given encounter, and provide competitive choices for nodes, and let you opt out of complex gameplay, which is an interesting one. So big fucking text. Temporal warp is being removed. So let's just go to that Google Doc, and where we had a big rant on temporal warp, we'll just delete that out of there. Yeah, do any of you want to go into detail on why this was terrible?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, from the Arcane perspective, I think it was probably a worse issue than it was for the other specs. It really centered a huge amount of damage for Arcane into that 4:30 time window, kind of forcing the spec to be a 5-minute spec. Additionally, the gratuitous amounts of haste that it gave us resulted in GCD capping very quickly, and as a result, haste scaling being very poor. And last but not least, the social element, which caused, huge amounts of friction in groups, especially when, you had raid encounters like we did this tier, where you had the last two bosses were 90% of the wipes of the tier, and Lust wasn't until, the last seconds of the encounter. It definitely created an unfun and uninviting playback or feedback loop with that talent for me.
Yeah, the social aspect is interesting. We do like alt runs on farm, and this tier in Gnarl Root, like we have mage alts as well, and like everyone in the raid is like, do not fucking lust on pull, like lust this damage phase, like do not lust on pull, and like every single time it's just bloodlust animation is like from an alt as soon as the fight starts every single time. But yeah,
And like instead of like feeling rewarded when you lust, like yes, I finally get to go fast, zoom. It's like, man, where is my lust? Why am I going so slow now? Like we accidentally lusted on our last smolder on clear, and my parse jumped up by like 30 points, and I was like, where was this the whole time?
yeah. I also think like high haste, just you run into issues, especially whenever like Frost and Fire might care about like travel time of spells and things like that, and it just becomes a little bit awkward. And the game has moved away from 5-minute cooldowns in basically every other class. I'm trying to think like what the last one was, maybe like Doomguard and Legion. So, you know, like Blizzard have identified that 5-minute cooldowns maybe don't fit into the current game. So yeah.
It's too long between fun, right? Like you want to have fun often. You don't want it to be like every 5 minutes I get to really slam and have fun. And
yeah. You run into issues where like
80 pages.
Yeah. You run into issues where like you suck in a 4-minute fight, but you like pump in a 6-minute fight, and then again at like 9 and 11 minutes and things like that. And it can be kind of polarizing in that regard.
And then the baby mages, like so many people come into like Alter Time and help, here's my log, what am I doing wrong? And they've got 3 temporal or time warp casts across the dungeon because they just don't realize they can double lust and then use it in between. And then that learning curve of trying to figure out when can I use it and have it back for when the group needs it is just terrible for new mages.
Yeah.
I think people also struggle a lot with fast-paced gameplay sometimes too, and I think like newer players tend to struggle with double lust windows and really maximizing their spellcast in that window too.
Also really awkward. The shifting power makes your lust cooldown like slightly less than 5 minutes. So you can get into maybe new mages it happens to them more, but like you lust just before 10 minutes, and then if you're in a dungeon, it like lust comes off, or people lose their lust debuff and they're like, right, lust, and you're like,
yeah. And then I think we've all seen that line, right? Fucking mages, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then there's the opposite where you're like, you know you're not going to lust at 10 minutes, so you really want to lust like at like 9:45 or something whenever the group's not going to get it. Yeah, so good to see that it's going. Anything else on Temporal Warp?
Thank God it's gone.
Yeah, rip bozo.
Yeah. So I'll give a quick review of the Arcane one. So Arcane has a lot of inherent complexity with mana management, and that complexity is not well represented in the spec tree. Talents that might seem simple to manage on other specs become a headache to juggle alongside Arcane's burns and mana management. This paired with new elements being added by hero talents make it seem like the right time to address these issues. So we're still working on changes, but we can share this. Radiant Spark will be redesigned to be much simpler. It will also have a competitive choice node for people who do not like the scripted gameplay style of gameplay it incentivizes. We're also looking at increasing the power of Arcane's procs and giving them more exciting procs, such that responding to them as they come up is almost always the best move, even in your burns. Okay. Do not like I'm not a Radiant Spark fan. I like the Radiant Spark gameplay whenever you had like the big barrage, because at least the payoff felt worth it. Whereas right now it's like, all right, cool, 4 Arcane Blast did a bit more damage to my CDs. Like, great, this is overtuned. Please get rid of this. Forum being the Arcane person.
You definitely haven't felt Radiant Spark since Shadowlands, right? Like it's like a GCD you spend because it's a cooldown and you don't really give a shit otherwise, right? And it's even funny because I did some testing earlier in the expansion, and if the dot component weren't part of Radiant Spark, we might not have even taken it at certain points in single target fights, because it procs Arcane Echo, and it has like these tertiary effects that you don't really think about that add into it to actually make it competitive right now. The Harmony issue is also a part of that, right? There's a weaker talent, Arcane Harmony, that hasn't boosted it in a while. But overall, I mean, I couldn't be happier to hear this. I think one of the biggest complaints I have about the Sunfury tree and the Spellslinger tree for Arcane is that a lot of that is tied to the clear casting proc, and hearing that they plan to expand the scope of that proc is exactly what I want to hear. So pretty happy with this.
So, I'm reading this. What procs are they going to incentivize? Like, what can they increase the power of to like put the power back in your burn?
I think I mean, when it comes to arcane proc, I think creating a version of clear casting that doesn't that either doesn't interact with arcane explosion and instead interacts with a more conventional, part of our AoE kit like barrage or orb. Um, but I also think that something like AoE missiles could come into effect here and make clear casting a lot more of a valued proc in AoE. Like the 4-piece set right now, if that were baked into clear casting somehow, or a talent that you could take that made it always cleave, I think that would be pretty. I think people would love that, honestly. I think people love cleave missiles. I think they hate what they have to do to get cleave missiles, right? The having to do 4 clear castings, just it's too much time, right?
Especially in the AoE where you actually want those procs.
Yeah, I also think the generation of clear casting is a big issue too, right? Like I'm hoping this rework they change it back to like the Legion style, right? Where clear casting was a proc on your spell cast rather than you had to spend X mana and have a percent chance to proc based on the mana spent. Because that, tying it to just spell cast in general allows AoE to really have clear casting proc. Because right now Barrage doesn't cost mana. Nether Tempest cost almost nothing. Orb cost almost nothing. I mean, you spend more mana on Mass Barrier than you spend in your AoE rotation. So it's it definitely could use some help there.
Yeah, the implication I get as well, they specifically call out procs during CDs at some point here. Oh yeah, so like that makes me think they're talking about like the nether precision clear casting, where you go like clear casting to nether precision, clear casting to nether precision kind of thing, and like it doesn't really matter how like you might like waste clear casting on things like that, and you clip arcane missiles. Like I think they would probably don't like that gameplay. Like that's what I was thinking with them specifically calling out the burns. I'm not even sure what other procs Arcane has. They have that one we played in whatever the first tier was, the Razageth tier. The one that's like you had a proc where your next clear casting wouldn't get consumed or something.
Oh yeah, concentration. The talent above Arcane Harmony that it had like a bunch of bugs, right? It didn't
Yeah.
it didn't create nether precision when we played it. It also you couldn't consume it unless you had a clear casting as well. So it
Yeah.
like had a like funky issues with it.
There was also like the fake clear casting bug where like you would get the prop but you didn't actually have clear casting, so if you like tried to move or something it would like cancel the cast. You're like, oh, okay then.
So that still exists in AoE.
Yeah, so if you have multiple clear castings right now and you Arcane Explosion, your subsequent clear castings do nothing until you generate one or clear another one or clear down to 0.
Definitely not guilty of clipping an evoc because I thought I had a clear casting.
Sweet. Anything else on these arcane changes?
No, just need more details, right? The devil's always in the details.
Yeah. Okay, down to Fire. Fire will likely be the first to test new changes. These changes are targeted at giving Fire more talent options, particularly in AoE. We want you to be able to assess the encounter and adjust your talents accordingly, and that means being able to alter how good Ignite, Flame Strike, Phoenix Flames are at different target counts. We're also taking a look at Fire's suite of maintenance buffs and culling a select few of them. We were actually talking about this just before we went live about how much we like Sun King's Blessing now versus in Season 2, because in Season 2 you had like Rune of Power, you had the Charred Embers buff, you've got Blaster Master, you had Sun King's Blessing, and it's like there was all like it was just like a bit too much stuff. Like all of these things would be fine, but like I want you to get rid of a quarter of them, you know. I'm not really sure what they'd be targeting now. Do you have any idea, DGen?
I'm wondering if they're planning on cutting out Feel the Burn, because that's really our only maintenance buff left. We have Sun King's Blessing, we have Feel the Burn, and then like Improve Scorch. Those are like the 3 main ones we're doing. With the Season 2 tier set that we are getting back and is in the data mine changes, we have like those 3 additional buffs we're tracking. But I think the core stuff as it stands right now, I think they might get rid of Feel the Burn. I think that's the most likely target. Since the rework in 10.1.5, Feel the Burn has been very, very passive because it's also maintained with Phoenix Flames now. So instead of like pooling your resources and trying to get that 3 stack during your combustion and like really min-maxing that aspect of it, it's just kind of always up because it's a symptom of your rotation. So I think that might be the most likely target for a maintenance buff being removed.
Yeah, Feel the Burn or Blaster Master, as it was before, is one of those things where whenever it's really good, like it feels good to maintain it, but then whenever it's like, okay, if this is going to be permanent, we need to bring it down to earth a little bit, and then it's like, if it's not really good, it just kind of feels a bit meh to maintain. And then like you said, with Phoenix Flames, maintaining it now, and we're going to go into a tier now where we're going to be casting Phoenix Flames a lot more. It's like, maybe what's the point? Then the other one you said was Scorch debuff. Someone in chat was saying that too. I think that's probably a good candidate. It's like the most recent one as well, so I think people are like not attached to it as much as they would be attached to other buffs. Since
So
like
that one's the Scorch buff. It's pretty passive in execute. Like outside of like these small windows when you're activating SKB and you're like stuck in that hard cast, it's pretty easy to maintain. It's very passive. Except when you have Temporal Warp, which is dead, because with Temporal Warp pushed your GCD down and your Scorch was shorter than GCD, breaking a lot of interactions. With Temporal Warp gone, that buff is a lot easier to maintain in those lusted executes.
yeah, but then yeah, and then you go back to the, if a buff is really easy to maintain, like should it be there? Like, would you rather have like one buff that you have to think about rather than like 3 buffs that you don't have to think about like 95% of the time, but then there's just weird 5% of the time where you do have to think about them? And it's like, I think going back to what they said above about maybe making things a bit more streamlined, it's probably, I think either or both of those are good candidates to go. Someone in chat also mentioned Firemind, but we don't really play around it, so
I don't even have a tracker for it.
yeah, same. So yeah, I mean that one could go, but
yeah. It's funny because there's a bunch of things for fire like that, right? Like improved Scorch, Firemind, what is it? The Fevered Incantation, right? There's a bunch of these like passive buffs that you don't really do anything around, and I guess improved Scorch is the one-off in that case because you do one special action for it every, 5.5 minutes or whatever. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's just it definitely could use a cleansing of that just to make the spec kind of simpler, in my opinion. Like I don't think those little buffs really add up to anything interesting.
Yeah. Do you know what I'd love for them to kill? Flame Accelerant? Is that what it's called now? I think they renamed it when they made it a real talent. Not a fan. It just like I don't know. It feels like it was a PvP talent made for if you're kiting for too long and you haven't cast in a while, so let's make your next cast quicker. And it's like, all right, guys, we've got a way to figure this, get this into the filler rotation. I'm like, no.
I've kind of liked it. It's kind of varied up the combustion rotation a little bit, but it is very annoying to min-max. And then with like the bugs that are included with it, oh my god, I hate it.
Yeah,
it's going to be a lot worse, I think, too, with FrostFire Bolt. Right, because it's going to affect FrostFire Bolt instead of Fireball.
Right, yeah, that's a good point.
These hero trees are bringing all these stacking multipliers. Your next instant cast is 100% more. Well, then you align that with a Flame Accelerant proc, and it's just like, oh my god, here's all this damage for no reason.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, because when it comes to like the Frost and Fire Mastery, we'll get into the talents in a bit, but if like FrostFire Bolt is your main way of stacking the opposite, in Fire's case, Frost Mastery, and you want to go periods of time without casting it, then I think it's kind of like an anti-synergy thing that you probably don't want in the spec. Yeah. And then the other point they talk about is altering how good Ignite, Flame Strike, and Phoenix Flames are in AoE. It's really interesting that Fire has these. I don't think any other spec in the game has such distinct AoE profiles that have both had long periods of time where they've been viable, yet they've like never got the balance right, except for the last season in Legion. Don't know if anyone pushed keys back then, but I did, and like that, I think that's the only time I used both at the same time.
I'm really excited they're actually paying attention to this, because at least like hanging out in the Ultra Time Discord, you get so many mages coming in. Well, what key level do I play this? Like, I need the black and white, and I'm getting this death by choice because both of them are good at their perspective, strengths. But like Ignite right now, it's really good at that priority damage. But then you look at the overall and you get clowned on by a Shadow Priest that's pressing one button. and it just feels bad, even though you're speeding up the key.
Yeah. But I think there's an issue right now. Well, it doesn't look like, to be fair, it doesn't look like they're addressing this issue where like you have to talent into one of these things. Like in Legion, whenever I was doing a key, it'd be like, okay, we're doing a big pull, so I'm going to press Flame Strike in this pull. And then we get into another room, we go to the next room, and there's a big mob with like 4 small mobs. It's like, okay, I'm going to ignite the big mob. But because you have to spec into these things, it kind of makes that trickier. Like, I get that maybe it's harder to balance, but it doesn't look like they want to change that.
The way I'm reading it is they're going to lean a lot more into Ignite at those low target counts, and then Flame Strike is going to be more popular at those big target counts. So I think they're going to rein Ignite in a good bit, so it's not as competitive.
Yeah. It's also good that they call out Phoenix Flames because, as we'll get into, there's a lot of changes that seem to want to turn that into a real spell, which is good.
I really hope when they get under the hood with Phoenix Flames too, they fix the timing issue at 15 yards or whatever, where your Phoenix Flames doesn't generate the heating up or hot streak right away. It's a really distracting bug.
I thought they would have fixed a lot of the Phoenix Flames bugs when they changed Fire Blast to spread Ignite. Because I think a lot of the Phoenix Flames bugs came out of how they hacked the Ignite implementation into that spell. Because none of them existed before that. And then they all just appeared at once. But yeah. Do
we want to get into Necrolord?
Shadowlands, man.
Yeah, I was going to say there's like 5 lines for fire, and we spent twice as long talking about compared to the 3 paragraphs above. Okay. So with the exception of a few talents we're looking to address, we're feeling good about Frost gameplay and tree. Our first batch of changes for Frost will be small in scope and targeted at adding a new build that should be reminiscent of the Deathborn playstyle from Shadowlands, while also freeing up some talent points. So they added, for those that didn't play in Shadowlands, the Deathborn playstyle was a 30-second cooldown that got extended by your legendary, I think. Or not a 30-second cooldown, a 3-minute cooldown that lasted for 30 seconds, and it caused your Frostbolts to cleave for the duration and give you a stacking spell power buff every time you cast Frostbolt. So they tried to bring that in. There's a talent on the left-hand side of the tree that cleaves Frostbolts. And the next one down, where whenever you cast so many Frostbolts, you should have Frozen Orb, was a legendary that people used with the Necrolord thing to then have that kind of combo work. But it is completely bombed, this expansion. I don't think anyone has ever spec'd it on any boss or in any dungeon. Anyone got any further thoughts on that?
I think that's an interesting playstyle to bring back for this fight. I do choose Necrolord Frost. But I think this is kind of targeted at that kind of vocal minority that don't enjoy the Glacial Spike playstyle. So I don't know if it's ever going to be a competitive option, but I think that's what they're trying to get at here.
Yeah, I have pretty bad feelings about this because I don't think anyone really liked the Deathborn playstyle for Frost. I think they played it because it was like the good version of Frost. But I think people would much rather the alternate to Glacial Spike be Ice Lance, right? I always think about the Packed Ice build back in BFA, where, you got a bonus on Ice Lance when you hit things that while your Frozen Orb was up, so it turned Frozen Orb into a cooldown. But again, that had Rune of Power with it, right? So it was like you stacked those and you got some extra benefit from it, and I really liked that. But I never liked how immobile Deathborn felt for Frost.
Yeah, I don't like. This might sound weird. I don't like. I don't want to call it like Whack-A-Mole Frost, but Frost with just like a lot of buttons. I think like the Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance plus 1 or 2 things is like a really smooth gameplay. It's really easy and like it's really simple. Maybe people don't like that, but I think as far as like simple specs go, it's like a really well put together one. I feel like might be a hot take, but I certainly like the low bloat Frost.
I think that between Fire and Arcane, there's a lot of like complexity in Mage already, and then Frost having that very simple, repetitive rotation was nice. It's like an entry level Mage spec, and I do miss it because I suck at Frost, so I like the easy rotation.
Yeah,
I don't think we're ever going to go back to that, sadly.
Yeah, it's just very smooth, but yeah, hard to know with until we see changes, I suppose. Okay, are we good to go into what we were actually here to talk about?
Could always rely on Blizzard for a curveball, right?
Oh, of course. Right, let me just get up.
Impeccable timing.
While you're doing that, I think it's actually kind of funny, right? They're going to get rid of temporal warp, but they're not going to do anything about time anomaly. So enjoy Casino Mage next expansion.
Yeah, they might. Mhm. Yeah.
Time to get on the forums and complain.
I was
Yeah.
thinking that
I mean,
that talent was like a necessity because like to compete with temporal warp because you can't play temporal warp all the time, so you need like a thing there for whenever you don't play temporal warp. So I'm kind of hoping that time anomaly gets sort of shuffled out the back door while no one's looking.
Time to do what Porum's been saying for literally months. Replace it with Cauterize, Cold Snap, and
a prismatic, yeah.
P-Barrier, yeah.
Yeah, I used to
Yeah,
say.
I mean, to be fair, sorry, I was going to say, to be fair, I think we've all kind of been saying that since these talents were created for Dragonflight, right? Like,
Well, I remember saying even earlier than that. It's like, you know, when we had the old talent system of like the 7 rows of 3, I was like, if you put greater invisibility, cold snap, and cauterize on a row, it's like that would be such a sick row. Obviously, we got greater
isn't that what
invis
it was
baseline.
wasn't that what it was in Mist of Pandaria? I didn't play back then, so I never got to see it, but
I was
I
not
thought
playing
there
mage
was
then.
something similar to that.
I was playing
I
warrior
don't
and
remember
warlock.
last week.
I was abusing warlock in that expansion, unfortunately. But yeah.
All right.
Let's start with the. Do you want to start with FrostFire Sunfury, or where do you want to start? I have no preference.
Let's dive into FrostFire. It should be fairly simple.
Okay, so I guess I'll just go through the talents and then we'll stop on each one. There will be some of them that we have very little to say on, and some that we want to spend a while on. So FrostFire Mastery, your damaging fire spells generate a stack of Fire Mastery, and your frost spells generate a stack of Frost Mastery, and this is the same for both specs. So Fire Mastery increases your haste by 1%, and Frost Mastery increases your mastery by 1%, and they both stack up to 8, and they last for 12 seconds. And this says that adding stacks does not refresh the duration, which is quite interesting because I did have a log. Thank you to Preheat for posting this in the Alter Time Discord. It is in there if you want to go look at it. But I was looking at the Frost Mastery and it doesn't look like it like resets. Like I can't see the buff falling off.
Falls off.
Yeah, so one possibility is that the damage buff does fall off, but like the stacks that you build up towards other talents don't fall off. Or it's bugged, but none of us have alpha access, so we can't really test. But it was an interesting thing I noticed on this log.
It's a very early alpha build. I would lean towards it's a bug, not properly implemented yet.
Yeah. We'll not go into the issues with reaching max stacks until we get further down the tree. But okay, next one is a choice node. So we've got Meltdown. You melt slightly out of your ice block and ice cold, allowing you to move slowly during ice block and increasing your movement speed over time. Ice block and ice cold trigger a blazing barrier in the end. And then imbued warding. Blazing barrier also casts an ice barrier at 25% effectiveness. This also affects your mass barrier. Basically make your barrier 25% better. Any thoughts on this choice node?
I mean, barrier's the obvious choice. I think about Meltdown, and I think about like hunters and paladins on Farak catching all the orbs in intermission, and like doing that with the slow buff. You know what debuff on you. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna change anything about the usefulness of Ice Block.
Yeah,
I've seen some clips of PvPers testing it on alpha, and they seem to like it. But like the only thing I could think of in PvE where we would use that is like, I don't know, like Sark, you're baiting a black hole and someone drops a hole right in front of you. You want to move away from it a little bit, but it just seems a very locked in double barrier angle.
Yeah, it's really good, and ice cold is already good, and you're probably at full health when you come out of ice cold. So
yeah, it also does nothing for ice cold, right? Like.
No.
So you basically, the most common talent setup for mages, the last 2 tiers, won't even be able to take this talent.
It does mention ice cold.
Barrier.
It mentions it, but it doesn't say it does anything, right?
Well, technically, the increased movement speed does come after ice cold. So unless you get more than 100%, I don't know. I don't think it's good anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just get a free barrier. That's about it.
Oh yeah, the free barrier, that part for sure.
Yeah,
Which
that's
when
what
you're
I
taking 60% reduced damage, that's what you need, another barrier.
70%, and you're healing to full HP basically if you've got that talent.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't see that one being good. But moving on. So Frostfire Bolt. So launches a bolt of Frostfire at the enemy, causing damage, slowing them, and adding a dot over 8 seconds. And it generates a stack of both Fire and Frost Mastery, as it's a spell for both. And this replaces your Fireball and Frostbolt, right? Just to confirm that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So like 2-second cast basically becomes your filler. I do have a little video here of the animation if no one's seen it. Again, thank you to Preheat for posting this. Very modern animation. It's not the big blur of blue and red that we were used to. It's like a little thing of ice with like fire swirling around it.
It's a Frostbolt with an afterthought of fire.
Yeah. That's maybe what the original one was.
I like the little extra effect it procs too. You can see them fire that off every now and again in the graphic.
Yeah.
So it throws the bolt, and then there's an extra chunk. I think that's the AoE component of it, right? From the
Possibly.
later talent, I think.
I don't know if it's in this clip, but the way you're mostly using this in Fire, at least, is you're always queuing that hot streak pyro into the end of it, so it does look more fiery in actual gameplay. From the PTR or alpha testing, it looked like your Phoenix Flames and like some of your other spells had a little blue tinge to it when you were spec'd into this, so there is more like VFX baked in. But for the huge like, what do you call it? What is it that old people like to do? Reminisce. So like this huge spell
Bro,
that everyone reminisces about.
That's what World of Warcraft players do.
Down.
Yeah. Yeah, some people are saying in chat that it doesn't replace your filler, which is why I was getting confused asking that question, because I think it's supposed to. Like, I think it just becomes your filler spell. Whether or not it's replacing it or not, we're not sure, or what it's supposed to do.
Fire replaces Fireball.
Yeah.
Or at least it did in the initial implementation. So they're asking if you can link that alpha log in chat.
I can indeed. Okay.
So, one of the interesting things about Frostfire Bolt is actually that it's a lower cast time than Fireball. The Fireball base is 2 1/4. So it'll be a little bit quicker. You'll probably run into haste issues a little bit sooner. And mana issues a little sooner, too.
Is Fireball that much at max level?
We have a talent that reduces it by, I think, 0.5 seconds. But on the flip side of that tooltip says 110% of spell power. I think Fireball right now is 126% spell power.
Okay. Someone just said Frostfire Bolt replaces Frostbolt for both specs. I forgot we had Frostbolt as fire, if I'm going to be honest. That would make more sense. Yeah.
I feel like that might be an alphaism.
Yeah, that's got to be an alpha bug, honestly, because it said Fireball and Frostbolt in the original talent introductions.
Yeah, either way, first alpha build, don't worry too much into it. Yeah, and I think what you're saying about the damage, like the damage will probably change on like a lot of spells, so maybe not something to worry about too much right now. If we're good to move on, next talent is a choice node again, Elemental Affinity. So the cooldown of frost spells with a base cooldown shorter than 4 minutes is reduced by 30%, or Cauterize resets the cooldown of your frost spells with a base cooldown shorter than 4 minutes. Any opinions on these?
Both of them are pretty bad. So Elemental Affinity is going to be giving you a 30% reduced cooldown on things like Frost Nova and Ice Nova, those things that we rarely press rotationally, and it's more like a panic button for us. Flame and Frost is interesting because if you look at it from the perspective of a Frost Mage, it's whenever you cold snap. So they have this like controlled way of proccing it and getting that cooldown reduction on their fire spells, which would be like Dragon's Breath or Blast Wave, those really powerful utility spells. But for us as fire mages, again, we're going to be getting reduced cooldown on like Ice Nova and Frost Nova because they hate us, I guess.
I
Yeah.
can just imagine a fire mage in a dungeon, like, all right, I'm gonna go stand in this mechanic because I need to proc caught to get dragon breath reset really quick.
Yeah. Let me
Yeah,
just die real quick, guys.
Ice Cold is 4 minutes, isn't it?
Oh, actually, yeah, it is 4 minutes.
A base cooldown shorter though.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I know whenever you have the full talents, it's 3 minutes. But yeah, the base cooldown's 4.
Yeah.
So do we
I'm
have
not sure if that
anything?
would apply.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
do we have like
Ring of
anything
Frost,
good?
Frost Nova, Ice Nova. That's it,
Cone
really,
of
right?
Cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are okay. So basically, these are both terrible.
Oh, Mass Barrier is a frost spell. However,
No fucking way.
It's an arcane spell in the War Within. So they changed it in the War Within to be an arcane spell to prevent that interaction. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
someone.
Ice Flows. That's good.
Yeah, someone just said Ice Flows. So
Yeah, Ice Flow is a good one.
Elemental Affinity with Ice Flows is actually probably pretty good then. It's basically 30% cooldown off Ice Flows. Pretty.
I mean,
Like,
hopefully it
more-
resets all 3 instead of just 1, right?
Yeah. Oh no, but I was thinking of like the one that puts the cooldown, not the cauterize one. Let me stand it.
Yeah.
Guys, I need to tank this sorting. I need to reset Ice Flows for my parse.
Yeah, I need to move.
Yeah. Or you've like there's fire spawning and you've no ice flows charges and you just wait for the first wave of fire to hit you and then you ice flows and move out of the next ones. Yeah. Okay. So not great talents, but maybe some.
Tendril.
Yeah. Maybe some niche uses there. So going to the first one in the next row, we have Isothermic Core, which is basically Comet Storm calls down a meteor and meteor calls down a Comet Storm. Thoughts here?
The absolute coolest spell in this tree. So there's actually a clip in that Google doc of it from Alpha. But the best thing about this is Meteor is whitelisted for shatter, so you can shatter your Meteor with your CMS as well. And then Combustion will cause your CMS to crit as well, so you got that nice parity. So on fights like Tendril, you can pad your heart out.
I don't know if this is the right clip. This might not be the right clip.
I put 2 of them in there. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it's this one. Okay, thank you to Hopeful for these clips. We didn't ask you for them, we just took them because they're in public. Yeah, it's pretty cool. See like the Comet Storm and the Meteor coming down. Yeah, so this has some weird interactions whenever it comes to Frost and Fire Mastery, right? Or does it? Does this second spell count towards your mastery?
Yes. So right now on Alpha at least, when you hit the Meteor and the Comet Storm hits, Fire gets 7 stacks of mastery instantly, basically.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a, I guess, imbalance, is that Fire can farm that the opposite mastery up a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot faster. I think they'll change that.
It's kind of cool if they don't, because like then you're getting that proc right on pull, right? As soon as you hit Meteor and your first opening FrostFire pull, you know what I mean? You hit your excess frost right away, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
The only downside to this talent, and again, it is my favorite talent in this tree, is it does lock in Meteor as a talent choice for even single target fights. So people who don't like Meteor, like me, because I'm bad at pressing that keybind, you're going to be locked into it. So it kind of takes that choice away.
Yeah. And this isn't a choice node, so like you have this, like you're going to have this if you're playing FrostFire, which is a little bit awkward. But yeah. Cool talent, but I guess not much more to say on it. So right in the middle of the tree, we have another choice node. So severe temperatures, casting frost or fire spells increases the damage of your next FrostFire bolt, stacking up to 5 times, and FrostFire bolt cast time is reduced by 10%. Yeah, 2 sort of passive buffs that will probably just take the one that sims higher, but the cast time one is probably quite nice to play with since it's going to be our main filler spell. Any additional thoughts?
The real question I have with this one is, are there going to be pre-pull degenerate behavior? Am I going to be dropping Rune of Frost and Frost Novaing and using Ice Cold during combat just as a DPS GCD, right? That's always things I'm worried about whenever there's something like that does a stacking buff when you just cast a spell, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to do damage or anything, just has to be casted.
Saying you didn't like pressing Arcane Explosion Frost Nova before every pull in Castlanathria?
Or
I
stacking
I have
CC.
I have Counterspell macroed into Arcane Blast right now because I don't really do much M plus, and so in raid I keep it on cooldown. I never use it on anything but for ACADs. So yeah, I just macro it into Blast.
Before we started this stream, I did have some concerns with the cast time reduction actually breaking the some interactions with all the excess haste that we were going to have. But those problems are dead and gone, thank God.
Yep. I do think it's funny how many times Counterspell has been a DPS gain. I think it's like three expansions in a row. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an DPS gain longer than that for Arcane because it had a small chance to proc clear casting in Legion, and then when they shifted to the mana cost proc for it, it became a DPS cooldown in BFA and on.
Yeah.
Weird.
Legion,
But
you
yeah,
had the
I don't
dinosaur
want to.
proc trinkets in Legion as well, so you could like Counterspell to proc your trinket, Lucid Dreams. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I definitely worry about having if Blizzard, if you're watching those, please remove these stacks on pool. You know what I mean? Do what you got to do to make sure we're not casting Rune of Frost pre-pool. or Ring of Frost rather.
So I'm going to read out the next talent, and then we can jump straight down without talking about it because I think it ties into some other things. So FrostFire Infusion is your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to trigger an additional Bolt of Frostfire, which deals some damage, but more importantly generates Frostfire Mastery when activated, which is your stacking fire and frost buff. And I'll jump straight down to these two talents, which are Excess Frost and Excess Fire, which work very similarly. So whenever you get to max Frost Mastery, your next Phoenix Flames will cast Ice Nova at 200% effectiveness, and the cooldown of Meteor will be reduced by 5 seconds. And then you have Excess Fire, which is reaching max stacks of Fire Mastery, causes your next Fire Blast to apply Living Bomb, and when this Living Bomb explodes, it reduces the cooldown of Phoenix Flames by 10 seconds. So, reason I kind of wanted to jump straight to those is this talent is really important for proccing like the other spec. So if you're playing Fire in this case, it's going to be really important for proccing Excess Frost, because you really don't want to be in a position where like I can't see a healthy spec where you're casting utility spells to get your like Frost Mastery up. Like I just don't think that should ever be a thing. If you cast them anyway to like stop a cast or interrupt something, cool, but I don't think it should ever be in a DPS rotation. So this is like a nice way of beefing up, you know, your Excess Frost in this case. Thoughts on these?
This is another pretty cut and dry one. The only downside is it's adding another random route, which I know Frost Mages are a huge fan of in Mythic Plus on Sanguine Weeks. So it's another route that you got to pay attention to. Other than that, it's just very boring. You get more meteors, which means more meteor CMS is very cool.
Yeah. For what it's worth, you might be reading this Excess Fire one and thinking like, oh, this is terrible because Living Bomb is terrible. We'll get into it, but there's like a lot of Living Bomb juice that has been data mined that is not in this tree, but we'll talk about that later.
This could be very good with the data mine changes.
Yeah, very nice. I guess right in the middle here we have your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to activate Frostfire Empowerment, causing your next Frostfire Bolt to deal double damage and do AoE damage. And it grants you the maximum benefit of Frostfire Mastery and refreshes its duration. And then it's approximately 1.2 procs per minute. Hope this procs in Combustion, I guess. Is that what we're thinking?
This is just going to be another random proc that we're praying for and consuming on proc.
Yeah.
Nothing really interesting about it.
I think it's just important that this doesn't end up in a place where it's really like degenerate if a procs during cooldowns and is like completely useless if a procs outside them. You kind of need to find that healthy middle ground.
I think we talked about it earlier, but this is the interaction we were talking about with like Flame Accelerant, where if we could line those two things up, you get those like stacking multipliers on the base damage, and it could just be ridiculous.
Oh yes, I knew I read this somewhere. So Last talent, FrostFire Empowerment grants you maximum benefit of FrostFire Mastery and refreshes duration, and whenever you press your CDs, you get this proc. So I guess you're guaranteed at least one proc. So I'm trying to read how this works. So you press Combustion, you get the max benefit of the Mastery. Mastery duration refreshes. You get this proc, which you can then cast again to get the maximum duration again. Am I understanding that interaction correctly?
So the bottom one, that's going to be your guaranteed proc. So when you enter your combustion, you get that FrostFire Empowerment, and then you have to spend it before you get the maximum duration.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So
yeah,
this causes your empowerment to refresh it, but you have to spend the proc in order to get that refresh.
Okay, much more balanced. Fine. That makes sense to me. So it's not like a double proc. It's like a single.
Yeah, it might be a case where you wait for your buff to fall off from entering Combust or Icy Veins, and then fire your next one, right? Rather, like if you get the proc from the talent above it, for example.
Yeah.
That way you stagger out the buff for the length of your cooldowns.
At like the core, how this is going to play out is when you activate your combust, you're going to get a proc. So you don't need a hot streak coming out of your precast for combust because you're going to have that instant guaranteed. So just precast, pop combust, cue that FrostFire empowered bolt into the end of it, and that starts your chain. And then anytime that FrostFire empowerment happens, you'll react and just send it on a proc.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Maybe makes Flame Accelerant a little more appealing, but maybe also frustrating if you don't line them up well. Anything else on FrostFire?
Just a really minor thing. It's so weird to me that FrostFire Bolt isn't the starter talent in this tree, right? It's the thing that converts your spell and kind of kicks off everything, but it's not actually the first thing you'll get when you get to War Within, which is just a little weird, you know?
Yeah. Calling these trees is a little bit of a bait, right? Because you're going to have the entire tree like all the time. You're really just going with the choice nodes, and the rest are just passives.
Yeah.
So
I'm just thinking of that like initial level up experience part of it, right? Which is the only reason to care about the order of these anyways, because you're getting them all, right?
Yeah. Okay, good to...
I hope they update the visuals on it a little bit of a letdown for such like an iconic ability that people have been asking for so long. But we'll see.
Yeah, I've actually seen people say that the old one is better, which is I don't know if that's the right take, but it's a take, right? And that's
the big fucking blue-red blur just across the screen. Okay, Sunfury time?
Yes, the fun one.
Okay, we'll try the same format. So the first talent here is called Spellfire Spheres, and a lot of things in here interact with this in some way, so it's kind of important. So every 6 times you consume Hot Streak, you get a Spellfire Sphere. While you're out of combat, you'll regenerate them. They increase your spell damage by 4%, and that stacks up to 3. So stacking damage buff, essentially, by consuming Hot Streak. Mana Addiction, first talent. Consuming Hot Streak grants you 2% haste for 10 seconds. Multiple instances may overlap. So what they usually mean by this is it doesn't stack in the normal way, like you just get multiple buffs and each one have their own duration. I know some of you have a lot to say on this, so I'll step back.
Well, I did have a lot to say on it, but a lot of those issues have been solved. So prior to the Temporal Warp removal that was just announced, at base haste, so 0% haste on your gear. Preheat was getting about 12 stacks pretty consistently, which is 24% haste. So at 24% haste with the Temporal Warp, so you're double lust, you were at 109% haste off the rip, which if you've been watching any of the alpha gameplay, you've seen fire mages going out of mana nonstop, which, mana addiction out of mana makes sense. I think with the removal of Temporal Warp, we're going to have a lot better of a time. We won't be gearing minimum haste to account for this. I think it's going to be a lot healthier for the spec. I still have some concerns over just how much passive haste we're going to be getting from both this and then random time anomaly procs or whatever else. because since the removal of Pyroclasm, the value of haste has gone down a lot for fire, because we don't need like all that cast time reduction as much. And fire just feels good to play with high haste. So any talent that's like forcing us away from haste kind of feels bad in a way. But this is a very cool like passive ability in the hero talent. It's very like heroic. It's a very cool like just passive compared to the other trees that you're seeing. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Any
I
thoughts,
like it
Coral?
because it's good theme. I like the good theme part of it. You know, being addicted to mana as a Sunfury Blood Elf is basically the arcane mage dream, right? Or being a withered in Asuna. So I enjoy that. And like Degen said, you know, without temporal warp kind of ruining the scaling of haste, it's a welcome addition, honestly.
Yeah. I think they need to be careful with talents like this that like snowball off each other. So like you get a haste buff that makes you cast more hot streaks, which means you get like more of these. You like generate them quicker. So they just need to be careful about that, but I'm sure it'll be fine with like temporal warp. Which moves us over to Invocation, Arcane Phoenix. So whenever you cast Combustion, you summon an Arcane Phoenix. So it will aid you for the duration of your combustion, and it casts random arcane and fire spells. Over its duration, your Arcane Phoenix will consume each of your Spellfire spheres to cast what they're calling an exceptional spell. So, little bird that follows you during CDs. I think I have a clip of it somewhere too. Yeah, here we go. So you can probably see the bird here on the left that is just railing into the wrong target dummy. So hopefully that doesn't happen much in raid encounters. But yeah, you can see he just casts a bunch of spells. Did have a log up to try and figure out what spells it's casting and how often. So I guess, spoiler alert, there is a talent that makes it cast other things. So there is a talent further down that lets it cast Greater Pyroblast and Arcane Surge. But this is sort of a breakdown of what it's casting. So we've got like Pyroblast, Arcane Surge, Greater Pyroblast, Phoenix Flames, Barrage, Meteor, Living Bomb, Flame Strike, and Barrage. That's over a pretty long log. What are our thoughts?
The exceptional spells.
Yeah, go ahead, Degen.
I would say the exceptional spells out of that list are your Greater Pyro, your Surge, and your Meteor. Those have a finite amount of times they can proc while the bird is up. Then you have all the baseline spells, your Pyroblast, your Phoenix Flames, those boring ones. An important thing to note about this bird is A, it's a terrorist. It targets whatever it wants currently. And B, it is tied only to your actual combustion press. So for Sun King's Blessing, if you activate a combustion via Sun King's Blessing, you do not get a bird for that. If you extend your combustion, the bird dies at its normal time. It doesn't get extended with it.
I think that's generally a healthy thing. I think we talked about it a little bit for the show, but like the idea of like if other things are going to give you combustion, you need to be able to balance like the combustion spell that you press, and you need to kind of minimize like how many things are affecting like Sun King's Blessing combustions or time anomaly combustions. So yeah, I'm just bringing up your little sheet that you made.
How so this is from Landfear.
Yeah. Just kind of like how often each spell was being cast.
Yes. So he did 11 runs, and you can see the distribution for each run. The important thing to note from this chart is the Flame Strike category. That one only procced when he was actually in range of an AoE-able set of dummies, so 2 targets stacked. So it does seem like it is target aware. It won't just be slamming Flame Strike in single target, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you for that, Landfair. Don't know if you knew that Degen ripped your log or whatever it was, but that's why everything's public, you know. Cool. And yeah, it'll consume your Spellfire sphere. So I guess they do probably need to balance this in a way that consuming your spheres doesn't feel bad, since it does give you a damage buff, but it should be fine.
I think that's one of the more interesting things about it is that the sphere consumption happens every other spell, starting with the first spell when it spawns. So like the moment you enter combustion, you lose 4% of your damage going into combustion. 2 GCDs later, you lose 8%. 2 GCDs later, you lose 12, right? So it's really front loaded, which I'm always a fan of, right? Like the best damage profiles are front loaded burst. But the concern there on maybe the arcane side is that, you're going to want to really rush into your Touch of the Magi window, maybe even without barraging into it like we normally do. So it'll have some interesting rotational complexities there.
Yeah. So next one, I'll do these two talents together. Burden of Power. So whenever you gain a sphere, your next Pyroblast or Flame Strike does double damage. And whenever you consume that proc, you call down a storm of 8 meteorites. So basically a fire comet storm. And each of those reduces the cooldown of Fire Blast by half a second. So you get 4 seconds off your Fire Blast. Thoughts?
Cool.
Yeah, pretty much. It's going to be passive damage. CDR.
It's very cool. The important part here is Inglorious Incandescence, the Fire Blast reduction. That's basically baking in the Mechagon bracers into you every time you press your Phoenix Flames with this buff active. And it also adds like that nice splash damage from the meteorites.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting too that with the hot streak requirement on Spellfire Spheres, you'll probably get 2 of these during your combustion. You know what I mean? Like this is not going to be a rare thing or anything like that. It'll be fairly reliable to get this reset, and like I said, maybe even twice, maybe even 3 times during high haste.
Yeah, the thing that gives you a spear when you combust, it's not in this tree, right? It has been data mined, but it's not here. Where is it?
It's in the tree. It's I want to say the final node.
No. I remember looking for it. I've seen it. Like it is in the data mine spell, so I'm not really sure where it is. Well, we can maybe try and find it in the background.
I don't think it's in the tree yet, because I don't think I've seen it.
But I'm pretty sure it is in the game. I'm not sure where it is. Like I've seen it data mined, and whenever I look at this log, it seems like the sphere's
middle second from the bottom.
Middle second from the bottom.
I know it's in there.
Oh yeah, so it grants you a sphere. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so the cap is 5, but judging by this log, that takes you above the cap. So you summon a Phoenix, you go up to 6, it immediately consumes it and goes back to 5, apparently. As long as that's not a bug.
Rock or something.
Yeah, so assuming that that's not a bug with the log. But yeah. Lessons of... Oh yeah, okay, you guys want to talk about this one. So Arcane Phoenix has a chance to cast Gravity Lapse or Supernova as exceptional spells, and will periodically spell steal buffs from enemies, or Gravity Lapse, which it doesn't say here, but it replaces Blast Wave, which is basically stun your target and 2 other nearby targets for 3 seconds. I know you have some thoughts on this.
This is going to be one of those things where you wish you didn't have that talent sometimes, right? Because more often than not in Mythic Plus, you want Blast Wave. You want that extra stop. You want to be able to knock things out of bad zones, stuff like Sanguine. And Gravity Lapse really removes that completely, right? You still have a stop, but it's much fewer targets. With Blast Wave, you can interrupt a pack of 20 mobs, right? With this, you can interrupt 1 and then a chance at interrupting the right other 2, because they're smart targeted. Or just AoE targeted, rather. And then the alternative, Lessons in Debilitation, is flatly a damage loss for anyone in PvE content. No PvEer is ever going to want to take that spell for anything. So it's going to feel like a bad choice in Mythic Plus sometimes.
Yeah, I can just picture the really degenerate, this enabling, it's terrible 99% of the time, but 1% of the time, MDI players have figured out this pool where if we take our Arcane or our Phoenix, we can just chain interrupt this massive pack of 30 mobs with our Phoenix, and no one else wants it.
Or alternatively, you find some niche use for Gravity Lapse where it snaps mobs or something like that. You know what I mean? There's always room for stuff like that when you start messing with the Z-axis, but it'll be interesting if stuff like that comes out. But right now, the talent doesn't instill a whole lot of faith for me.
Yeah,
I know the PvPers are very excited for their gravity lapse. They're calling it the better deep freeze.
Yeah.
Because they get that 40-yard like targeted stun, and that's great for them. But in PvE content, it's just kind of, you know, a poor choice either way, especially like Sanguine Weeks, where you want that blast wave with the talent that extends the range you're knocking people. Well, now you can stun 2 of them in the Sanguine if you'd like.
Yeah. I think if we had feedback for this one, it's like if you want blast wave, you have to take a DPS loss, and that's like not on. I don't think that's good at all. So perhaps there's a place for these, but not here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty solvable to, you know, you just remove the target cap for PvE, right?
Yeah.
Like they do have other spells where they have different target caps when you're PvP flagged, right? And just seems like an easy fix.
So Gravity Lapse is like super cool thematically. It's like very like KT Kel'Thuzos, like that whole phase where you're flying around in the ceiling, and so it's really cool in that aspect. I would love to see it get reworked to Gravity Well. So like you can pick a target that just sucks all the other targets in, kind of like the Shaman PvP totem, as like another or a different form of crowd control. So instead of knocking everyone out with Blast Wave, you're pulling everyone in with a Gravity Well.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my wish list.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. If we move on, next one, merely a setback. So Flame Barrier. I'm assuming this is Blazing Barrier. And they've got the name wrong. Now grants 5% avoidance and 5% when active and 5% leech after it expires. I feel like avoidance is like, you know that meme where it's like the monkey sees something as like neuron activated? I feel like when people see the word avoidance, it's like that. It's like if you think of this as like 5% damage reduction, which is better than 5% avoidance, it's like fine. And that's what I think this is. As far as a free talent goes, Barrier is pretty fucking good anyway. So this is fine. Does anyone know if this affects Mass Barrier?
I don't believe it does. Generally speaking, whenever it says your barrier, it usually only means when a barrier is on you, regardless of whether it's yours or not. So like Diverted Energy says your barrier, and it works on you even if a different mage in your group uses mass barrier and that gets on you, but it doesn't work on your mass barrier on non-mage targets, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, I think in the FrostFire tree, the barrier talent in there specifically said it affects mass barrier, so I guess we just assume it doesn't.
I went through the actual spell or the data mining, and there was a random line not tied to any specific talent that said this effect also applies to your mass barrier targets. So I'm wondering if some of our effects will be getting expanded out, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, that would be cool for sure. I think if this does get extended to mass barrier, it's going to be like a huge deal in Mythic Plus for people. I think in rating 5% avoidance, you know, it really only comes into play when you're facing one shots, right? For like whether your barrier saves you or not.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess like in a raid, it's still like fine. It's kind of like the like if you look at Prismatic Barrier, it's just like this spell is kind of bunkers, but now I've added this other thing on it that makes it even more bunkers. So, yeah.
It's kind of
and then 5%. Yeah. And then 5% leech is just who gives a shit.
Yeah.
It's just kind of up to Blizzard because like what they classify as AoE damage for the avoidance and what they don't is just so random. Like if you look at the Tendril list, literally every ability is avoidable. And then you look at like, I don't know, Laerdar, and like only 3 or 4 things are. So it's just like very inconsistent from them.
One thing that's worth pointing out on this talent as well is, so like mage's survivability is like heavily dependent on the damage profile of like the damage being done. So if you look at mages in like the first season of Dungeons, this expansion, they weren't considered very tanky. Like they weren't considered squishy, but they weren't considered like one of the tankiest classes. But if you look at them this season, they are. And almost nothing has changed defensively. We've replaced Ice Block with Ice Cold, which isn't a defensive upgrade, really. And the reason for that is because like dungeons are way more one-shotty, and they're not like, whereas in season 1 they're just like kind of like shit damage all over the place. And like mage is exceptionally good at surviving like high burst damage, predictable one shots, that kind of stuff. But if you're just getting like shit damage all over you, like they're not good at that. And this just makes you even better at the thing you're already good at versus, you know, if this was like a passive damage reduction in some way, like it would probably be better than, you know, something on barrier, which is interesting because, yeah, you'll never die to one-shotty mechanics as a mage anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure how much I like that, but whatever. It's relatively inoffensive.
To be fair, I think the barrier talent in these hero trees shouldn't be the way that they deal with that anyways, right? I really would like to see them take another look at displacement and what it does and its pick rates and, you know what I mean, how it fits into our toolkit. Because right now it does kind of fit that anti-rot niche, you know what I mean? It's just not really pickable because of how our tree is structured and the other options being so massively better, right?
Yeah. I guess it also depends how much you value like asynchronous or asymmetrical, like defensive balance. Like, is it okay that we have more defensives than a warlock because a warlock takes 10% less damage and has 10% more health and has a shield built into their kit, you know? Like, I think it's obviously people will get mad if Mythic Plus stats aren't balanced, but I think it's kind of okay that like different specs survive in different ways. But I guess it's up to Blizzard if they want that to be the case. Yeah. Okay. That was a lot for a barrier talent. Moving on. Overflowing power. So whenever you cast combustion, its duration is increased by 0.5 seconds for each sphere. So you can have up to 5 spheres, up to 2.5 seconds. Doesn't consume the spheres. And Sunfury execution. So Searing Touch now starts at 35% health instead of 30. Any thoughts on either of these?
I think it's a very easy choice. Like an additional 2.5 seconds on combustion is just a no-brainer. An extra 5% in Searing Touch really won't matter grand scheme. Even with like improved Scorch, that 5% isn't gonna matter. Whereas 2.5 additional seconds on combustion means 2.5 additional seconds on your bird. And this whole tree is all focused on making your bird do more damn. So I think that's a very locked in choice.
Yeah, but I agree. I think the fact that the bird is tied to combustion the way it is, and that talent increasing both of them, like makes it a really difficult area for Sunfury execution to compete, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because you said that was a no-brainer, and I was like, oh, I don't know which direction this is going to be a no-brainer in. I initially thought that the first time I read it, but I was thinking like, that's 5% extra boss HP where you're farming SKB, and there is, again, in the data mine stuff, there are stuff that makes Searing Touch even better. So I actually think it's probably better, but I don't think it's as no-brainer as I initially thought. But yeah, we can go over the Scorch stuff whenever we get there.
It might just be one of those things that comes down to what sims better in different target situations, right? Combustion duration might be your better Mythic Plus talent, right? And Scorch might be your better single target talent. I think the interesting one is actually the Arcane version of this. Bombardment doing 30% more execute damage for Arcane is a bit more impactful in AoE, especially. So I'm interested to see how that choice flows on for that spec.
And there always could be those weird bosses where they start at like, 40% health or something, like inverse Sylvanas type stuff, where that execute could be really strong.
Or where they start at 30% and then this talent's fucking worthless, right?
Or that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, Codex of the Sunstriders, we basically already covered this in other things. Basically changes what is an exceptional spell, and you're always going to have it, so don't need to worry about that. So the next choice is, I don't know what that word is, never heard of that. Blizzard might have made it up, but spheres can stack up to 5 instead of the default 3, or Ignite the Future, which is generating a sphere while your Phoenix is active, so basically while you're in combustion, your actual combustion that you pressed, not Sun King's Blessing, will cause it to cast an exceptional spell. So I'm assuming that this means cast an exceptional spell without consuming a sphere?
I believe so. I think it's when you so the spheres that you have up when your Phoenix is summoned, those are the ones it consumes. Anything you generate while it's up doesn't get consumed by it, is what I understand from what Preheat
Okay.
said. So it's essentially right if you go into combustion and then you're like you hit the hot streak that summons a sphere. Ignite the Future will send off an exceptional spell as you generate it, and then that sphere will stay up for the rest of your combustion and until your next combustion, right? That's my understanding of that.
Okay.
Funny enough, I feel I was joking with Preheat about this the other day. Ron Dermancy definitely sounds like it was named after someone named Ron. All right, this does not seem like a real word to me.
It is a real word. I can confirm that.
Okay.
I think this choice node is literally just going to come down to the Sims, because like the exceptional spell versus you get those 2 additional orbs, which is like 2 additional exceptional spells, but you only get that value if you're actually reaching those 5 orbs before your combust. So I think it's going to come down to a robot question, because I don't know how often they're actually reaching those 5 orbs on the alpha testing.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at logs to see like how often this happens, but it's kind of difficult because this looks like this one casts 6 spells. Although you generate one when you go into combustion, so I'm assuming that one, like the one you generate from pressing combustion, I'm assuming that gets consumed by the Phoenix.
Yes. So
I believe
the one
so,
that is
yeah.
generated allows you to go over that cap temporarily.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like Porum was saying, that whenever the Phoenix comes out, only the spheres that are out get consumed by the Phoenix, and I'm wondering, like, what order does
the 6th one is coming from? Hold on, I gotta go back to the right calculator.
The Codex of the Sunstriders, yeah.
Codex. So that one gets added and then consumed instantly.
And then it'll consume a sphere every other GCD after that, right? Until you have none. But it only counts the ones that were up when you cast. That's what Preheat said. So I'm not 100. I haven't tested it obviously, but that was my understanding of it.
Wait, it looks like your Phoenix consumes them all instantly. Looking at this log. Like, I don't see the step going back down again.
Yeah, that
So
is
whenever
interesting thinking about it. It's like he consumes them all as he spawns. So, like, do you just lose all that % damage?
I wonder if that's for the better, because we were talking about how like losing a damage buff over the course of combustion is like major feels bad, whereas if you never had it in the first place, then maybe it's okay.
It's just % damage outside of CDs then, right? Which is a little who cares, but at least it looks cool.
Yeah, and obviously we need to keep in mind that this behavior might change over the course of alpha. Okay, and last we have Memory of Alar. So while your Arcane Phoenix is active, you gain twice as many stacks of Mana Addiction, which is your haste buff from down here. So whenever your Arcane Phoenix expires, it empowers you, granting you Hypothermia for 3 seconds, plus an additional 1 second for each exceptional spell it cast, which is just your standard Hypothermia, Pyroblast and Flamestriker instant and crit. Quite cool. I think Hypothermia has struggled to find a place in the rotation or in builds. I don't know if it still exists in the talent tree. We haven't seen the talent tree. It hasn't been updated with the data mine spells we've seen, as far as I know. So we'll have to see where this fits. But I think having like a deterministic Hypothermia is a good thing, as long as it doesn't get in the way of Sun King's Blessing. Like if you're in this awkward spot where, right now, by the time you get to combustion without temporal warp, you're like ready to cast a Sun King's Blessing, and then like you've got this proc. That might feel like really bad. But if we can get around that,
it's
probably okay.
This is like the ideal Hypothermia because it's a deterministic proc, not this RNG nonsense that we have in the class tree currently. I looked at a couple of, I think it was Hopeful's logs, and it didn't interfere with SKB too often. It was mainly that one on pull where you're just barely getting your SKB as your combustion's ending. Because most of your other combust, you're going into it with a few stacks.
Yep.
So it kind of offsets it a little bit. But it could definitely be annoying. We don't want to like have to choose between cancel ordering this hyperthermia or munching our SKB.
Yeah. I'm assuming the twice as many stacks just means like you consume a hot streak and you get 2% buffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, kind of cool. Hopefully with a lot of the focus on Phoenix, we can maybe see Unleash Inferno builds pop their head up instead of Sun King's Blessing. Okay,
That's
anything
what I'm
else?
looking for.
Anything
The
else
most
on this
important
tree?
part of this tree.
Okay,
Sorry.
you go.
The most important part of this tree is that now Fire and Arcane have the coolest pet, and Frost Mages are stuck with their Welly chain casting whatever Ray of Piss.
This is true.
I think the
This is
biggest thing about
indeed
this,
true.
though, is that Fire actually has a birth profile again with this tree. This offers something that Fire really needs right now, right?
That's what we said when they added Unleashed Inferno to the game, and look where we are now, Porum. Look where we are now,
Hey,
Porum.
funny you should say that because Preheat was swearing by UI for this tree because of the SKB hyperthermia negative interaction, right?
So were we all until The Sims came out. So were we all.
Yeah,
to be fair,
I've been joking around. If UI is the right play for this tree, it might actually damn this tree more than it promotes UI, right? Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
To be fair, during the rework, UI got absolutely dumpstered because they had way too much CDR into it. So it was really good, and then they murdered it and forgot to buff the damage.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like I've said this on previous shows, but I think if they do buff UI, it is important that they lean into like the damage part and not the CDR part. Because if you lean into the CDR part, you just go into like combustion uptime, which is what SKB is. So you want to lean into make this a burst damage spec. Okay, are we good to move on to new spells?
Yeah.
Or change spells? Okay, so as a preface for anyone watching this, these spells are data mined, or these changes are data mined, but we do not know like where they go. They're just things we have. They may never make it into the game. They may be baseline, they may be talents. I would expect some amount of talent rework, but here we go. So I've broken this into 3 categories of just stuff, and then Phoenix Flames and Living Bomb. So we'll start with the stuff. So Scorch deals 300% damage to targets below 30% health. Combustion now grants critical strike damage equal to 25% to your critical strike, and casting Combustion refreshes all charges of Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames. Anyone want to pick one of these and start off?
Yeah, I'll run with it. Down in Flames, just a huge buff to Scorch. We were actually looking at some Season 4 sims for Fire Execute, and the amount of damage we're actually gaining in Execute is pitiful for the talent investment that we're doing. Like I think it was within like a 1.5% change to just drop those and pick up like Firestarter or whatever else. So this is huge. This is a really good buff to our Execute, which we need because right now we don't really have an identity as far as like a damage profile because we're just always dealing damage. Yeah, we're very mobile, we're very tanky, but we don't really have a damage profile that sets us apart from Arcane or Frost enough to have value on a specific prog fight. So I like Down in Flames. I'm thinking that this Tempered Flames choice, or this Tempered Flames rendition is going to be a choice node with an improved combustion. So instead of converting our mastery, we'll lean more into the critical strike damage and get more of that burst. Because right now, improved combustion is, I think it's converting our mastery and extending our combustion by 2 seconds?
Yes. 12 seconds.
So I think this
75% mastery.
I think this might end up as a choice node where instead of like speccing into that mastery conversion, which is really good for AoE, but kind of whatever in single target, we might be dialing back our combustion duration, putting more oomph into it with this critical strike damage. That's what I'm hoping for, because that would lean into the UI.
I'm curious because I was actually thinking that Tempered Flame might be a choice node with the spontaneous combustion, is what I was thinking, rather than improved combustion. Because you still have that stat conversion with tempered flame that improved combustion has now. So I was thinking they might be trying to move improved combustion to tempered flames and then reintroduce a different alternative that might actually be an alternative, because right now, there's no choice.
Yeah, that could definitely be a possibility. I'm actually not a fan of spontaneous combustion at all. I think fire as a resource management spec, like balancing your usage of your fire blast and your phoenix flame in filler so that you have enough for your burst windows, is like a very fundamental skill that fire needs to express. This would encourage us dumping all those resources right before our combustion so that we can get the value back from this spontaneous combustion. And I'm not a big fan of that. I know some people are. I like casting Fireball because I'm, stupid, I guess. But I like casting Fireball. I like having that actual filler component to the rotation. So I'm not a huge fan of this, but I can see a lot of people that will be.
Yeah, I think there's a place for like a tuned down version of it. Like if it gave a charge of Fire Blast and a charge of Phoenix Flames, I think you can maybe find like a middle ground there where you're just adding something that maybe just punishes newer players like a little bit less, but isn't like removing all of the resource management. But I think I like all of these talents.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say on the Scorch one. Okay, you go first. You go first.
No. Go ahead.
No, I am the moderator. You go first.
I think the spontaneous combustion thing is more than anything a PvP talent. Like I don't think it's necessarily going to ever be the best PvE talent, because you always have cooldown sticking, and generally refill talents tend to not compete with recharge talents in continuous combat. Whereas in a PvP scenario, popping combustion and getting all your shit refunded is really useful, right?
I'd have to disagree for him, because like right now we're playing Sun King's Blessing, so a lot of times we'll get that Sun King right before our actual combustion, and you have to make that choice between doing like a conservative, like scorching more in your SKB so you have resources for the combustion. So I think there is an appeal for this, especially with the Sun King's play style. I still don't like it.
Yeah, I do agree with that last point. Like fire's in a spot where it does actually get drained of resources outside of CDs because of Sun King's Blessing. Obviously, if this tree forces us towards UI, then this talent becomes, or this ability will become a lot worse. But yeah, I think there's a middle ground for it. One thing I was going to say on Down in Flames, the thing that buffs Scorch to 300%. So it was something like this in Legion. I think it was 350%, and I think you had like okay execute in Legion. But ever since they nerfed it, like you've just not had execute, and I think a big part of that is Scorch not affecting kindling, and I just think that's such a.
So it does now. Scorch
it does now?
Included in kindling.
Yeah. Okay. Because like that was the issue in Legion. Like you had the big damage buff, but you had. It wasn't like Scorch wasn't on it, so like it counteracted it, and then we lost the damage buff, and then you had like bad Scorch plus bad kindling, and you were like, what can I do? Right, so like I think this is like a lot better than people think it is, and this is why I was saying that this talent, Sunfury Execution, like might be quite good. Again, it's probably a lot worse with UI, but if you're using Sun King's Blessing and you have real Scorches plus farming SKB 5% earlier, plus having then being able to save Fire Blast for those SKBs, like I think there is potential there. Not saying it is like the best, but like that's kind of like the history of like Scorch Execute being kind of bad. But yeah,
kind of interesting weighing in those different play style and elements of like recharge versus refund, and how that's how the APL logic's gonna handle crap like that. It's gonna be really freaking complicated to be like, I'm trying to think of like, your Fire Blast charge lines where it's like you're trying to taper them out, but sometimes you're just trying to get rid of them all, and it's just gonna be a really complicated mess, I think.
Don't bring up the APL, please. These changes are going to be so much work.
Yeah. So I think with like the new kindling or new air, guess it's not new, but the way kindling works now and the Scorch buff, I think is like better than people think it is, based on kindling being the issue in Legion rather than the scorch damage. I think this is quite good. And combustion granting crit damage, like the spec has kind of moved away from crit, and like, you know, it moved towards high haste, and haste feels good. But like crit also feels good to play with, and I think like people have got accustomed to crit being bad, but like it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like it shouldn't just be like, okay, crit's terrible for mage, so like that's just how it is, and we're never going to fix that. Like I think it is like good to strive towards making it better, because it makes the spec feel better. You don't run into like balance issues where if you're going through like patches and expansion, like specs scale at different rates and things like that. So like, as much as it's been normalized that crit sucks, like I don't think it should be like that. So I do really like this change.
Honestly, one of the most fun times I had playing Fire was during BFA Corruption, when you could get 100% crit, and it was just like, you know, you moved like a BM hunter, and just a lot of fun, you know, bolded numbers on the screen.
I never played that build. Fun fact. I couldn't be doing visions on my mage. I need to be doing visions on my 6th ult instead.
We want to move on to the Phoenix Flames.
Yes, I was just snipping that in the background. Okay, so here are the Phoenix Flames ones. So some of this is going to look familiar, but essentially the tier sets that we're going to be playing with last season and next season are coming back as talents. So that's Phoenix Flames applies a debuff that increases the target's damage taken. You cast a spell into that, you get a stack of Charring Embers at max stacks of Charring Embers at 20. Next 2 Phoenix Flames do more damage and refund the charge. Then we have Call of the Sun King, which basically merges the 2 Phoenix Flames talents down the left-hand side right now with Alexstrasza's Fury and the current Call of the Sun King. Right? Yeah, current Call of the Sun King are basically just merged into one talent. So 3 charges, always crit. Really important, in my opinion. And then we have these new talents. So Phoenix Flames only hits 1 target. It deals 50% increased damage and applies more mastery. And whenever it hits 3 or more targets, your next flame strikes have their cast time reduced and their damage increased. So I guess I'll give my thoughts on these. I think personally I didn't like the Charring Embers Phoenix Reborn thing last season, because there was so much going on with Fire. You had Ruin, you had Sun King's Blessing, you had this, you had Blaster Master. And like I think now that a lot of that's been tuned down, it's maybe okay to give it another go. Especially if they're going to be putting some of the other buffs in the tree, like we saw on the blue post at the start. It might be good. It's like, okay, well, let's get rid of all the buffs that sort of sometimes do things, and let's have like 1 or 2 buffs that are impactful and you focus on. I think that's probably much better design. And then on Call of the Sun King, Phoenix Flames has this really awkward thing where you don't want to press it without certain talents because it just feels fucking awful. And it's like, those talents should be early in the tree, right? Like, if you think of the tree design, you've got these talents near the start where you almost always take them. And like, I feel like Phoenix Flames talents should be there to like make the spell functional. Yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on these?
I mean, I agree. I agree. I think, you know, Pyroblast, Phoenix Flames, Fire Blast, those are your core abilities, right? They should be at the top 100%. I think the really interesting thing about this is that Call of the Sun King is excluding out Dragon's Breath, which Alexstrasza's Fury has been, you know, kind of shoving down Fire's throat since Legion. And I'm really glad to see that, because having utility spells mixed with throughput creates a lot of complications in the moment for player decisions, and sometimes in unhealthy ways, or ways that end up, you know, causing group wipes or something like that. But additionally, it also removes part of Fire having to be right up the boss's ass, right, to do a competent rotation, which I'm always a fan of, like, mages not being melee. So
Yeah. DJ, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was not a fan of the tier 30 set, which is what Charring Embers and Phoenix Reborn is bringing back. But that was primarily because that tier set felt like a band-aid to Phoenix Flames, which we got originally in Legion. It was our Legion artifact ability, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was like this super impactful rotational ability. And then ever since then, they've just been cutting it down. until you have this very weak spell that you're forced to use by necessity, and it just feels like a worse Fire Blast. With these getting baked into the tree and not just being a temporary band-aid, I'm a big fan of it. I like Phoenix Flames feeling impactful. I like having more resources to play with. I'm just a little concerned about, again, excessive resources, us getting too much and losing that that skill set of like resource management.
Yeah. No, I can see that concern. I think it would be good to make like, right, let's make Phoenix Flames a real spell, and then let's like dial back from there on other things if we need to. Yeah, Phoenix Flames was really good in Legion. It's like 3 charges, always crit. You had the CDR from Ignite. It chain lightninged. It did AoE damage. So it was a good spell. So these next two,
really, yeah, go ahead. That's what I was going to talk about, those AoE ones.
So the next two are, I'm like, there's no way this isn't a choice node. Like you've got one, if Phoenix Flames hit one target, do this. If Phoenix Flames hits multiple targets, do this. So this is bound to be a choice node. And since it's not in any of the Sunfury or FrostFire trees, like it has to be like a talent redo somewhere. Yeah, thoughts, Borum, since you're going to jump in there?
Yeah, no, it's just, I think this is really in line with what they said today in their talk about making sure that there's some delineation of these spells at different target counts. I'm excited to see how this plays out, 'cause personally, World in Flames, the PvP talent that reduces Flame Strike cast time, one of my all-time favorite PvP talents. It's just fun to dish out Flame Strike in like a couple of seconds, you know? So that's definitely something I think that will be, even if it's not effective, I think it's a fun design for a talent. So I'm 100% with it.
Cool. Do we want to move on to Living Bomb?
Oh yes, bring on the Living Bomb.
Right. I'll let you. There's a lot of text on the screen. I'll let you. Don't have to read it out, but you can go on what you think of these changes.
All right, so to sum it up, they are unneutering Living Bomb that has been paying for its sins since the BFA Islands. Living Bomb can now contribute to your hot streak, which is great because now when you give up a GCD in combustion, you aren't punished twice by interrupting that 1-for-1 trade. Your Flame Strike is now tossing out flames or Living Bombs that can spread again. So your Flame Strike has been buffed, which is very similar to our current one, which is not Convection. What is the?
It's Flame Patch, right?
Eruption,
it's Flame Patch right now. Like Flame Patch has a chance to apply a Living Bomb.
Yeah. So this is like an improved version of that. Big fan. More Living Bombs. They're passive, but they're just Living Bomb. Just super cool to see go off. Explosivo is the one I'm most excited for because right now when we use Living Bomb, when we do use it, we want to press it right before the combustion so it pops inside your combustion and gets that crit. This automatically does it for us, so I don't have to feel bad when I pad. Convection is a talent that we already have, but this is a reworked version of it. So current Convection just reduces the CDR of your baseline Living Bomb. This one is going to give it a purpose in single target where it can do up to 100% increased damage. I'm hoping where this is positioned means we won't take it in single target, but it will make it feel better in like Mythic Plus when we are talented into it, and we can still use it on the bosses and not feel punished for that talent point. And then just our baseline Living Bomb, which it looks like they change up some spell power modifiers and all that good stuff.
Yeah,
they did cap it a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say they don't want to make us use it on single target. And like the hot streak contribution makes me think they do want it to be a single target thing. Obviously, like a hot streak contribution still works on AoE, but like I think with these changes, like the spell would do enough on AoE anyway. So yeah, I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I do get the vibe they want this to be like a single target ability as well.
I'm thinking they're going to position it over on that right-hand side of the tree where it's like all the flame strikey talents anyway. So like in a raid build, we wouldn't be taking Living Bomb, hopefully.
Yeah.
And actually,
hopefully.
I don't see it in here. but one of the big changes was to Firefall, which we currently do take, and we path through Living Bomb to get to it. Living Bomb is currently tied to us using Pyroblast and Fireballs. In the reworked version, it is now based off Living Bomb explosions, so we won't be forced into Firefall and single target.
Unless, no, I'm hoping that we don't have to do that in single target. But yeah, I mean, Living Bomb's a cool spell. I think it's, you know, similar to FrostFire Bolt. It's kind of iconic, and it's just been forgotten. So yeah, I think making it into a good spell would be good.
I think the two things that concerns me with these changes. So the first one is, with combustion applying Living Bomb, that just tells me that I'm gonna tab to a different target when I the Living Bomb first, and then tab back to my target to combust. But also with it generating Hot Streak and being applied with combustion, I really wonder if that one is going to generate Hot Streak. So then is combustion going to generate Hot Streak, right? Which would be, in my opinion, I think that's a good change. I think that would be actually a pretty good thing to enter combustion and not have to hit Fire Blast with it, right?
Yeah. There's an interesting line here. It also says, like, your chance to proc Living Bomb while on combustion is increased. And I'm like, what's that mean? Like, I mean, obviously, like, this isn't like public yet, so clearly, like, a developer's just writing shit down. But it's kind of like, is that just all of the Living Bomb things? I guess we'll find out. But
the most important line here, though, is definitely that very last one. So current Living Bomb is technically uncapped. Any target within range it can spread to. This says up to 5 enemies. So I think that's good for the health of it, because that uncapped scaling was what was making it dangerous and why it's been neutered so many times. Yeah, so I'm hoping with them. Go ahead.
It's square root target cap today, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So and like square root falls off really fast. Like, yeah. I think anyway. I don't know. This is where you need Norner, but I'm pretty sure it does. So like, because I think I remember.
No, I have it written down. Don't worry.
Yeah, like it gets really shit really fast.
Yeah,
or like shit per target. Yeah.
But the way this implementation reads, it's consuming a hot streak makes your next Pyroblast or Flame Strike turn into a Living Bomb, right? So it should be a completely passive option.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it's probably like Living Bombs from all sources. Maybe. If it's just using the word proc. I don't think the word proc ever gets used, but yeah, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I think that's everything we wanted to cover today. I mean, we were aiming for a time, and I said, let's aim for like 30 minutes, and the stream's at 1 hour 37, but yeah.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, Blizzard dropped notes on us 5 seconds before we started, right?
Yeah. Okay. DJan, do you want to plug anything before you go?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Porum?
Season 4 guide should be updated by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, sweet. Same for me. If anyone's wondering, I went and farmed Dream Surges today so that I could get Season 2 gear, catalyze it into the Season 2 tier set so that I could record a video guide this weekend. As one of the most degenerate. That is the most I've played this game on farm as well.
You gotta look good for the guide. I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, mage-hub guides and YouTube guides hopefully this weekend. I'll probably not get all 3 specs done this weekend, but yeah. Thank you all for watching. We hope to make this a regular-ish thing. Cadence TBD, but I'll probably update the YouTube comments with date for other shows if we want to do them. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone in chat for watching. Thank you for the subs as well during that. Yeah, good to go.
Thanks for putting together this shindig, Toe. Glad to do more.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.